Alex had never imagined that the night the wind carried the last of his brother's laughter would be the night that carried the beginning of something else. He and Maya had met in the middle of a midsummer summer when the sun fell a little harder on the campus courtyard and the world felt just a moment more forgiving. Alex was a sophomore studying environmental science, Maya a freshman writing her thesis on childhood trauma and resilience. They had bonded over a shared love of old vinyl records and a mutual desire to do something meaningful with their lives. The tragedy hit them both at once, a single evening that was, in its own way, a long and exhausting day. Maja's mother had been in a car accident that left her paralyzed, while Alex's younger brother, Michael, was killed in a freak fire that broke out in their apartment building. Alex's father had already died from a heart attack earlier that month, and his mother had been the one to bring Maya into his life when she had been orphaned herself. The grief had been so great that they had slept on the same couch, the same bed, and they had begun to see the same shadows in the corners of their lives. They were both grieving, and they had not been able to speak about it openly. The words that had passed between them were only half-baked attempts at comfort, the way people sometimes say "I know what you feel" when they have nothing else to say. When the day ended and the night fell, Alex's mother had gone to bed. Maya sat in the corner of the living room, staring at the wall that held the framed photos of her mother and her grandparents. Alex had watched her for a long time, then finally spoke, "We have to get out of here." Maya did not know what that meant, but her eyes gave a faint nod that was both an agreement and a plea. The next morning, they took a train to the coast. They had not lived near the sea in their entire lives. There was a small town, a place where everyone knew each other and had been born in the same school. The town was called Willow Bay, and it had been a place where, in their heads, there was no time for sorrow or grief. There was only the tide, the gulls, and the endless horizon. Alex had packed only a bag, a few books, and a notebook, while Maya had brought a small camera and a sketchbook. They found a rented cottage that looked like something out of a postcard, a whitewashed house, a porch that sagged slightly, and a small garden with roses that had already begun to bloom. They had not told the new owners about their previous lives. They had only told them that they were moving out of the city and that they were happy to stay. The owners, an old couple who had been married for 50 years, had a fondness for simple, honest conversations and an unspoken kindness that seeped into the walls of the cottage. Alex's first morning there was spent setting up his small laboratory and sketching the sea's horizon in a notebook. Maya spent her days walking along the beach with the camera, photographing waves, gulls, and the occasional crabs that seemed to be holding the world together. On the fourth day, Alex woke up to a storm that would last for hours. The wind howled and the waves came pounding the rocks. He had thought that the sea would provide a kind of cleansing, but the storm reminded him that it was still a force that could destroy. Maya was still too tired to leave the cottage. Alex took her to the kitchen and made tea for her. "We're not going to let this storm bring us back to the city," he said. She looked at him and said, "But this storm is just as dramatic as the last night." The next week, Alex met a man named Liam, who worked at the local fish market. Liam was a quiet man, but he had a gentle smile that seemed to bring comfort. He and Alex discussed the best way to start a small business that would provide a good living for them and help them find a new purpose. Alex wanted to design small solar panels, and Liam wanted to sell fresh fish. Their conversation was the first time Alex had talked to someone about his past, and he had felt a subtle shift. The way Liam looked at him with a calm, unhurried, patient gaze reminded Alex that it was possible to live in this way again. During the next week, Maya's mother had called. The call was a quiet apology for leaving them when Maya was 13 years old. It was not an apology that made her feel better, but it was a conversation that helped Maya see the human side of her mother. She wanted to be a teacher for a reason, to do something that would make the world better, and that was why she had met Alex in the first place. She was determined to live the life she would have chosen for herself. One day, Alex and Maya went to a nearby beach that was known for its white sand and crystal clear waters. Alex, feeling an overwhelming urge to connect with the sea, jumped into the water. The waves lifted him and carried him a little. He felt the wind through his hair, the salt in his eyes, and the freedom of being alone. After a while, he swam towards a small cove and he found a stone that had a rough shape. He picked it up and felt that it had a strange shape. He placed the stone on a sandbank, a tiny piece of stone that was part of the earth, a tiny piece of his own body. He looked out to the horizon and he felt the distance between his past and the future. Later that night, Alex went back to the cottage with a notebook. He started to write about the events of that day, his feelings, and his gratitude. He wrote that, at the very least, he felt that the tide was a powerful force of nature, but that it was also a metaphor for a sense of peace and an inner rhythm that guided him towards the path he needed to find. He wrote that he was starting a new life and that he had a lot of work ahead of him. He was going to create a business that could help his small community, he decided. He was also going to work with Maya to write a new book about resilience. Maya spent the next days helping Alex create the plans. They worked together on building a small workshop with the help of the old couple who had bought the cottage. The workshop had a small piece of wood, a piece of metal, a small hand drill, and a wooden chair. Alex made the first small solar panel, and Liam tested it by placing it under a small sun. Alex was satisfied with the outcome. Liam was pleased that the small solar panel was working and was impressed by Alex's perseverance. They made a plan to go to the city and find an investor. The plan worked and they found a small investor. Alex worked to bring his solar panels to the city market. Liam went to the local fish market selling his product. Together, they were making a small but steady income. They were starting a small business. It was a few weeks after the storm when the old couple who owned the cottage left the town. They had lived there for years and had a deep appreciation for the small cottage. They left the cottage with a small key that was a token for a small business. Alex and Maya looked at the small key and realized that this was a symbol of their new life. They had taken their first step to the new path. Months later, Alex and Maya were able to build their business. The town grew and the cottage grew. They met new people, made new friends, and their life began to feel more complete. Their business was a small but successful solar panel and fish market. They had a new way of living. The tragedy that had come into their lives had made it easier for them to create a new life. It was not about the past, but about the future. In that way, Alex and Maya learned to live in a world that had a sense of both hope and pain. They had a small, quiet space to share the story of a time that was never easy. The sea had a story, too. It had washed away their grief, it had carried their hopes, and it had carried their dreams. They had found a new life, a new family in the people around them. In this new world, they were allowed to dream again.